Something is changing inside you right now, and you might not even realize it. It's not happening in your thoughts. It's not happening in your plans or your goals or your visualizations. It's happening deeper in your body, in your nervous system, in the cells themselves. There's a shift occurring, and if you don't understand what it is, you might mistake it for something negative. You might think you're losing motivation. You might worry that you're becoming disconnected or apathetic. You might wonder why things that used to excite you don't land the same way anymore. But what's actually happening is far more important than any of that. Your body is preparing to enter a new timeline, and the first sign isn't excitement or clarity or sudden inspiration. The first sign is quiet, a deep, settling quiet that feels almost uncomfortable because you're not used to it. Because for so long, your life has been run by urgency, by reactivity, by the constant hum of stress and survival. And now, suddenly, that hum is fading, and in its place is something you don't quite recognize yet: coherence. This is the beginning. This is how timeline shifts actually happen. Not with fireworks, but with stillness. Not with force, but with release. And if you're feeling this right now, if something in these words is resonating, it's because your cells are already responding to a frequency that your mind hasn't caught up to yet. Let me tell you what's really happening when you start to feel this way. When the old things that used to trigger you suddenly don't. When conversations that would have pulled you into drama now just feel distant. When goals that felt urgent last month now feel strangely neutral. This isn't burnout. This isn't depression. This isn't you losing your edge or your passion or your drive. This is your nervous system decoupling from the old identity that's been running your life. Because here's what most people don't understand. A timeline isn't just a series of events. A timeline is a stable pattern of identity interacting with possibility. It's who you are, consistently, creating what you experience, repeatedly. And when that identity starts to shift, when the person you've been starts to dissolve, the first place it shows up is in your body, not in your circumstances, not in your external world, in the way your nervous system responds to life. You might notice you're not as reactive anymore. Someone says something that would have bothered you for days, and now it just passes through. A situation that would have sent you spiraling into anxiety now feels manageable. A fear that used to grip you now feels like a distant echo. And this can feel wrong, because we've been conditioned to believe that caring means reacting, that being alive means being emotionally charged about everything, that passion requires intensity. But intensity isn't alignment. Reactivity isn't power. And the calm you're starting to feel isn't disconnection. It's coherence. It's your system finally coming into balance after years of running on stress and survival. When you've been locked into a timeline built on fear, your body lives in a constant state of low-level threat. Your muscles stay slightly tense. Your breath stays shallow. Your mind constantly scans for problems. Your heart rate stays elevated even when nothing is wrong. This creates a signal, an electromagnetic signal, that broadcasts out from your body into the field of energy around you. And that signal says, danger, contraction, not safe, not enough. And the field responds by giving you more experiences that match that signal, more reasons to stay vigilant, more situations that require you to protect yourself, more evidence that the world is exactly as threatening as your nervous system believes it to be. But when your nervous system starts to regulate, when coherence begins to replace chaos, the signal changes, and when the signal changes, the timeline begins to shift. Right now, as you're reading this, your cells are communicating with each other in ways you can't consciously perceive. They're exchanging information. They're reorganizing. They're responding to a new frequency that's emerging from deep within your system. This isn't metaphor. This is biology. Every cell in your body has receptors that respond to emotional states. When you're stressed, your cells receive chemical messages that tell them to prepare for threat. When you're calm, they receive different messages that tell them it's safe to rest, repair, and regenerate. Your cells don't distinguish between a real threat and a perceived one. They just respond to the signals your nervous system sends. And if your nervous system has been sending threat signals for years, your cells have been living in that state for years, but something is changing now. The signals are different, the chemistry is shifting, and your cells are beginning to reorganize around a new baseline. This is why you might be feeling tired lately. Not exhausted, but like you need more rest than usual. Like your body is demanding stillness. This happens because reorganization requires energy. Your brain is literally rewiring neural pathways. Old circuits that fired automatically for years are being pruned. New connections are being formed. This is reconstruction, and reconstruction requires your body to turn inward, to conserve resources, to prioritize the internal work over external performance. You might also notice that your emotions have leveled out. Things that used to send you into highs or lows now feel more neutral. This can be unsettling if you've used emotional intensity as your compass. If you've measured whether you're alive by how strongly you feel, but intensity isn't the same as aliveness. Often, intensity is just dysregulation. It's your nervous system swinging between extremes because it doesn't know how to find center. When your system finally finds that center, when it learns to stay regulated even in uncertainty, the swings stop. You feel more even, more steady, more grounded. And that steadiness is what allows a new timeline to lock in. Because timelines don't shift through drama, they shift through stability. As this process deepens, something even stranger starts to happen. You begin to feel unfamiliar to yourself, not in a dramatic way, but in subtle moments. You notice that your usual patterns don't fire the same way. The thought loops that used to consume you for hours now lose their grip after a few minutes. The situations that would have pulled you into overanalysis now just feel like information. The people who used to trigger strong reactions now feel neutral. It's like your nervous system has stopped cooperating with the old script. And that script was your identity. The repeated emotional responses, the habitual reactions, the predictable patterns, that was the version of you that stabilized a particular timeline. And now that version is dissolving. The emotional charge is draining out of the old loops. The neural pathways are weakening. The identity that held your previous reality in place is losing coherence. This is necessary because you can't enter a new timeline while fully identified with the old one. The observer has to change, and changing the observer means destabilizing the patterns that made the old observer feel solid and real. You might notice moments where you feel oddly detached, not depressed, just watching your life from a slight distance, observing your thoughts instead of being consumed by them, experiencing situations without full emotional immersion. This is observer recalibration. You're learning to be aware without being reactive, to witness without being swept away, to hold space for experience without needing to control it. And in that space, in that gap between stimulus and response, new possibilities gather. Because when you're not automatically reacting from the old patterns, the field has room to deliver something different. Most people panic when they reach this phase. They interpret the quiet as emptiness. They miss the intensity and try to recreate it. They seek out drama or conflict or stimulation just to feel something familiar. But doing that pulls you back into the old timeline. It re-anchors the patterns you're trying to release. It tells your nervous system that safety still lives in the familiar. Even if the familiar was painful, the invitation here is to let the quiet be. To allow the neutrality, to trust that what feels like nothing is actually everything reorganizing beneath the surface. Your body will give you very specific signals during this transition, and if you know what to look for, you'll stop misinterpreting preparation as regression. You might sleep more deeply, or need more sleep than usual. This is your brain consolidating new neural patterns. You might feel waves of emotion that don't seem connected to anything in particular, brief moments of sadness or nostalgia or even joy that arise and pass quickly. This is emotional release, old stored charges clearing out of your system. You might crave solitude more than usual, not because you're avoiding people, but because your system is recalibrating and it needs space to do that without external interference. Environments that used to feel exciting might suddenly feel draining. Conversations that used to engage you might feel exhausting. This isn't you becoming antisocial. This is your nervous system becoming selective. It's no longer willing to participate in frequencies that contradict the new coherence it's building. You might also notice that you're less interested in arguing with reality, less compelled to fight against what is, less attached to needing things to be different than they are. This isn't resignation. This is acceptance. And acceptance is the foundation of conscious creation. When you stop resisting what is, when you stop contracting against the present moment, your nervous system finally feels safe. And when it feels safe, it stops broadcasting emergency signals into the field. This is the shift. From survival to creation. From contraction to openness. From the old timeline to the new one. Here's where it gets interesting. Once your internal state has stabilized into this new coherence, your external reality will start to respond. But it might not look the way you expect. Some things in your life might seem to destabilize slightly. Conversations might shift. Opportunities might pause. Dynamics that felt solid might suddenly feel uncertain. This isn't things falling apart. This is reorganization. The old timeline was held together by your old signals, your reactions, your fears, your patterns of relating. And when you stop broadcasting those signals, the structures that depended on them have to adjust. Relationships that were built on you being a certain way will either evolve or fade. Professional situations that required you to operate from urgency will either adapt or release you. Dynamics that needed you to stay small will no longer feel relevant. This can be uncomfortable because even though the old timeline was limiting, it was familiar, and familiarity feels like safety to the nervous system. But if you can stay coherent through this phase, if you can remain regulated while the external world rearranges itself, something powerful happens. The field reorganizes around your new baseline instead of your old one. People who match your new frequency start appearing. Opportunities that align with who you're becoming start opening. Circumstances that support your new identity start manifesting. Not because you forced them, not because you chased them, but because the signal changed. And when the signal changes, what shows up changes too. Most people sabotage themselves here. They see the temporary instability and panic. They try to restabilize the old patterns because at least those patterns were predictable. They chase reassurance. They over-explain. They force connection where connection is naturally dissolving. But doing that just re-anchors the old timeline. It tells the field that you're not actually ready for the new one yet. The practice here is simple but profound. Remain steady while things rearrange. Don't contract, don't grasp, don't try to control the transition. Just stay in your new coherence and let the external world catch up. There's a final phase to this process that almost no one recognizes while they're in it. It's the phase where everything feels strangely ordinary. And that's exactly why it's powerful. After all the shifts, after the quiet, after the dissolving and the reorganizing, you reach a point where the new baseline just feels normal. You wake up without the old anxiety. You move through your day without defensive reactions. You think about the future without emotional volatility. This consistency is what locks the new timeline in. Because timelines don't stabilize through peak moments. They stabilize through sustained coherence. When your new state becomes your default, when regulation is no longer something you have to try for, but something you simply are, that's when the timeline fully collapses into physical form. And here's what's beautiful about this phase. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels inevitable. Like, of course this is happening. Like it couldn't have been any other way. You might notice your internal dialogue shifts. Instead of, "I hope this works," you find yourself thinking, "This is already done." Not as affirmation, but as quiet knowing, as simple fact. That knowing is the signal that your cells have fully resonated with the new timeline, that your nervous system has completed the transition, that the observer has stabilized in a new pattern. And once that happens, the external evidence follows. Not always immediately, because physical reality reorganizes through layers, but inevitably, because the field always matches the signal. If you're reading this and something in you is recognizing these patterns, if you're feeling this quiet, this settling, this strange neutrality where urgency used to be. Pay attention, your cells are already resonating with a new timeline. Your nervous system is already preparing for a shift. Your body knows something your mind hasn't fully grasped yet. And the most important thing you can do right now is not force it, not try to speed it up, not seek constant confirmation that it's working. Just stay steady. Maintain the regulation. Let the coherence deepen. Trust that the reorganization happening inside you is preparing something on the outside. Because here's the truth. You're not waiting for a new timeline. You're stabilizing into one. And every moment you stay in this new coherence, every time you choose regulation over reaction, every breath you take from this grounded center, you're locking it in. The shift is already happening. Your cells already know. The only question is whether you'll trust the process enough to let it complete. So if everything feels quieter lately, if you're less reactive, if the old dramas don't grip you anymore, don't panic. Don't try to reignite the old intensity. Don't question whether you're losing yourself. You're not losing yourself. You're finding yourself. The real you, underneath all the conditioning and fear and survival patterns. And that version of you lives in a completely different timeline, one that's been waiting for you to become coherent enough to enter it. You're almost there. Your cells are already resonating. The field is already responding. All you have to do now is stay steady and let it unfold. The new timeline isn't coming. You're already standing at its threshold. And the moment you fully step through, you'll realize you were never waiting at all. You were just becoming ready. And now, finally, you are.